Very good morning. Good evening. Myself, Vignesh. I work as technologist at SFLC.in, and today we are discussing about free software and its licenses. And I'm honored to welcome about our panelist Prashant Sugandhan for this particular panel discussion. I also thank everybody for joining today. Uh, Today's topic is on free software and licenses, and Prashant Sugandhan especially because he is uh, the legal director at SFLC.in, and he has been an engineer who turned lawyer. He has worked on intellectual property law, administrative law, and constitutional law, and he has also been, appeared in landmark cases in various tribunals and high courts and Supreme Courts of India. So I don't think, I think Prashant Sugandhan is one of the best suited for this particular topic. And um, before we jump in, I also want to thank Prashant Sugandhan for joining today. Thank you, Prashant. And I also want to, before we dive in into the topic, I wanted to give you a brief on why this particular topic is because the free software ecosystem wouldn't have been shaped without the very first GPL license itself. That itself is one of the reason why we should know about the license and understand why it is, without which the ecosystem, fast ecosystem as what we see now, wouldn't have been here. So yeah, welcome Prashant. And Prashant, I would like to have your opening remark on why free software licenses and what do they mean to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks, Vignesh, for organizing this session. And especially if you look at, a little bit about SFLC and the entire reason that we exist as an organization. If you look at when we were started in the year 2010, and the purpose essentially of starting this was to ensure that the free software developers, open source developers in India get the kind of legal support that they require, especially considering the various issues with respect to licensing. Now, talking about licensing, see, I mean, at maybe 2010 or let's say 15 years back, we had to tell people about what is free software, what is open source, and even when it came to the government, to explaining it to them required a lot of effort because that was an I would say period when many people were using free software, but now we are at a stage when each and every one of us almost has a phone which has essentially open source software in it. It runs on open source software. Then, if you look at most of the applications that you use, whether it is various banking operations, anything to do with fintech, most of these will have at the back end essentially open source applications, open source. The India stacks which run on open source software. Now, one reason I would say for the success of this movement as such, the way I would like to address it, is mainly because of the kind of legal foundation that this had. So when the software is developed, the moment you write something, it is something similar to, let's say, the way you write a novel. So the moment you write something, write a novel, write code as we call it, you have a copyright on it. And I would say the success of the free software and open source movement is because of the principles, the kind of copyright licensing methods which have been adopted. I would say that is a creative use of the copyright framework as we have it. So the way let's say the software came to be developed and software came to be distributed under the various copyright licenses or under the various free software or open source licenses, it ensures that the person who is given the software, who is given a copy of it, so you gain access to not just the software. The major difference between an open source software and a proprietary software is essentially how you can use it. Even a proprietary software, you will have a copyright license, but that license restricts the way you use it. But when it comes to a free software or an open source software, it gives you more freedoms. It gives you, I would say, mostly when you usually talk about the four freedoms, the freedom essentially to use the software, then you also get access to the software, so that, I mean, the source code, so you can study it, and you also can distribute it. I mean, when it's a proprietary software, you cannot, for example, you have a Windows CD, you buy a Windows CD, you can't really give it to your friend, or you can't really give it to someone to use it, because you are restricted by the end user license agreement. But in the case of a free software, the license permits you to copy it and even redistribute it. And since you have access to the source code, you can also modify it and even redistribute the modified version. So these are the major freedoms that you get when it comes to, let's say, open source software. So that is, I would say, is the major difference. And if you look at how this entire ecosystem has developed, is essentially because of the strong legal framework which is there for the software. So it is not just, I mean, often people say that, again, that's one area we'll have to touch upon when we talk about AI. So just because something is available there on the web doesn't mean that you can maybe freely use it. You also need to look at freely in the sense you can, it is public accessible on the web, doesn't mean that you can freely use it. It also, we also need to look at the kind of license which comes along with it. Somebody has published a photograph, that may not mean that you can use that photograph. Same with code. Just because the code is available, you also need to look at the license under which it has been published. Does that give you these freedoms to use it? Does that give you the freedom to copy it, reuse it, etc.? Those are things that we need to understand. And that is where this entire ecosystem of free software, open source software has developed so much. And we have a lot of people joining the movement, contributing it, and even now a lot of companies who are part of it, who have entire teams in, I would say, major companies who are working on it, contributing it, taking from it, and also contributing back. Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Vignesh. Yeah.
That is rightly said, Prashant. I mean, just because the data is available doesn't give anybody the right to use it or publish it. And writing such licenses for such data is very crucial. That applies for open source, I mean, software as well. And moving ahead, I would also like to understand how these licenses, these copyleft licenses are written in the first place, because it's very amusing to understand that the this is how I was taught free software in my earlier days, that the whole copyright copyleft license was written on basis of or using the copyright license itself. If you can add on to that, that would be a great understanding it.
See, as I said earlier, so what we essentially have when you talk about licenses, the basic legal concept is that of copyright. See, when it comes to law, there's nothing called copy left. Okay. So what we really have is like a creative use of the copyright principles or the copyright law. So the copyright law, one advantage I would say is like if you look at various jurisdictions, various countries, copyright law, thanks to the Berne Convention, it remains almost the same across countries. And what we have done here when it comes to the various, mainly the copyleft licenses, is that we have ensured that the copyright license is used in like copyright, like I would say the copyright law is used in such a way that the users get maximum freedom, and also written in such a way that ensures that the ecosystem survives. It's not just enough that you get access to software. For the ecosystem, for the community to thrive and survive, we also need to ensure that people contribute back. And then they are recognized, the persons who contribute are recognized, and then people can also build on top of it. Now, if this community has grown over a period, and I mean, we have come to a stage where almost the entire world depends on free software. It is essentially because of how strong these licenses are, and this has been litigated across the world now, and it has, I mean, essentially because of how strong the basics are. This has ensured that even when it comes to litigating these licenses, almost all the jurisdictions across the world, courts across the world, have agreed that this is something which is binding. Any person who downloads the software, uses it, He can't just decide. Once he has used it, that he can close it and prevent others from accessing it. Now, you will find a lot of this software being used in IoT devices, let's say commercial, um, let's say electronic systems, and in all these cases, they also now make it a point to provide you access to the source code. And this is thanks mostly to the let's say the way that the community has defended their right to access the source code, the right to develop on top of it. And that is the reason why we have most of the bigger companies now ensuring that when they're releasing the software, when they're releasing even products which are essentially built on top of let's say um copyleft software which are distributed under copyleft licenses, that they provide access to the source code. So that is one advantage we definitely have, and that I would say has contributed a lot even when it comes to something like electronic devices, to ensure that what happens inside and issues like how you can repair a device. I mean, that all these are kind of interlinked. Unless you have access to the source code, it becomes very difficult to do that. Thanks, Vignesh.
I mean, sure, Prashant. So, Prashant, I also want to highlight on the GNU GPL license, and before it all, the other licenses came up. What were the difficulties in, creating the GPL license, and how do you think GPL license itself has helped shape the free software community in a whole?
Yeah, what I was explaining earlier, see, the basics of all this essentially the copyright law and the way these licenses have developed over a period of time. This is because of a unique demand to ensure that persons who are using the software get the freedom. And then the way if you look at the way the version license was developed with consultations, etc., that was also built in the I would say the considering the ethos of the community and how we all work together. Finally, getting contributions from the community, consulting with the community as to how a license should be. That is how it was done when it came to GPL v3. So, one advantage that we have is, especially when it specifically with respect to GPL v2, there were some issues with respect to the patents and how it gets to be used. What happens when somebody, let's say, comes up with a patent lawsuit? So these were kind of addressed in GPL v3. So the entire process of that was followed in GPL v3 was something similar to what would be there when it comes to, let's say, development of an open source software. So the if you go through the license terms as such, so each and every sentence of it is written in such a way that the end user, the person who uses it, gets the, let's say, the maximum freedom and gets the let's say advantage of access to software, access to the source code, and his ability to let's say tinker with it. So that is the biggest advantage when it comes to copyleft licenses. So we these licenses ensure that the person who uses it also contributes back. If he has to redistribute it, he has to also contribute back. In the sense, when he is redistributing a modified version, he needs to ensure that this is along with the source code. That may not be the case with the permissive licenses. Let's say licenses like, for example, the Apache or the MIT licenses. So that is one core difference when it comes to what we call the copyleft licenses and the permissive licenses. The permissive licenses, it's not often necessary to give the source code in many cases. So that is one difference. So you get access to the source code, but then in many cases, somebody who is downloading it and using it, a person downstream, can also close it at some point of time. And so the benefits may not come back to the community. So that is one advantage that we have with something like the GNU GPL. And again, some issues like when it came to let's say the distribution of software like the SaaS model, when it is software as a service. So, so when it comes to providing the source code, everything is distribution. So in the case of SaaS software, often the software is not distributed, right? It is essentially you only give an access to a service. So that was a problem, and the FRO GPL or AGPL was an answer to that. And so that essentially, to answer your question, that shows how let's say the various licenses have developed to address various demands, yeah, over a period of time.
Thanks, Prashant. In fact, that was my next question actually, to understand how GPL itself has had multiple, versions and variations. Uh, Wanted to have a little bit clarity on why AGPL, which you have explained, and what's LGPL, and within them again why there is GPL 1, 2, 3. Why do you think these versions are required? What has made them have multiple versions of them?
It's essentially you develop software, right? You have versions over a period of time, demands what users feel. You need to address various situations, which, see, there are things which you cannot always foresee, things which happen. Like, for example, the way I explained the SaaS software. Now, earlier, how it used to be is you have software which is burnt onto a CD, you distribute it. And that changed a lot over a period of time. Then you essentially have software which is distributed over the net. That's also fine. Then you provide the source code along with it, you get access to the source code. But then we reached a situation when most of the software came to be distributed not as a product by itself, but mostly as a service. And you have access to the service. You have everything, let's say, deployed on a server, and you get access to the server. Essentially, you are getting access. I mean, you have like a username, password, login, and you access the service. There is no physical distribution as such here. So that is where people felt that the terms which were there in the GPL licenses, which ensure that you get, let's say, the person who is using it, modifying it to contribute back, that may not be possible, or that there could be some challenges when it comes to something like a SaaS software, because you are no longer distributing the software. So the obligations which were on the person who modifies it and then comes out with a modified version and then distributes it, he no longer had that obligation, because you're not distributing the software as such when the traditional terms of the distribution as we understand it. So that was, and the FRO GPL was an answer to that. So with that, even if you are providing only an access to a software instance, you need to ensure that you provide also the source code, because if you are modifying something and then you are providing access to selling, it prevents you from selling something. When it comes to copyleft licensing, you can definitely sell the service, but again, that should not restrict the freedom of users, and that is one challenge which was addressed by FROGP. Even with the versions that, whether it's V2, V3, there were issues with respect to patents. So that again is a major issue when you look at the IP challenges that we face. So software patents is one of the major issues, and the I mean, I would say we haven't seen that much of action here in India, thanks to the our legislation. And I mean, with the way it is being now interpreted in courts, I'm not sure how long that would hold good. But one advantage, at least we have in India, is we have when it comes to software patents, let's say patents on computer programs, algorithms, methods. We have, but again, so that is something which has also affected the free software community. We had cases where I mean, projects have been sued for copyright infringements, etc. So those, so V2 and was like V3 was also an answer to that, to ensure that somebody who is using the software, using the essentially the let's say a software which is distributed under the copyright under the copyleft license, like something like a GNU GPL, it does not use others who are using it, etc. So make sure that there is license given for the patent part of it also. along with the let's say the core source code part of it. So yeah, so those are issues which have come up over a period of time, and then like new versions of software which has addressed issues came up with when it comes to the core source code or core software asset. This is the on the legal side. This has been addressed by new versions of the, I would say, the licenses, and the new licenses like AGPL, which have addressed in some cases shortcomings of the earlier soft, I would say, open source licenses.
Yeah, definitely, Prashant. I mean, we have seen how the license have transformed so far and what are their importance. And I would, going forward, I just wanted to understand. I think everybody would be interested to also learn what's happening in the space of AI, and how these licenses are being written for them, or what are the challenges faced there. Because AI is not just the software; it's the source code, the software itself, and then the person who is training the model LLMs, and then there's also the data which is being used to train them. So we have to understand, we know that there's a lot of complexity, and we just wanted to understand more about what are the exact complexity in creating a license for them, and how or when can we expect it in the future it can be done.
Right.
Especially
So
speaking,
this is
there are no open source licenses, a proper open source license for AI yet, and companies, I mean, a lot of corporates have called them their own AI being open, but there are no licenses yet, built.
yeah. So one challenge is again. I mean, how do you really define open source AI? And we have had, I mean, we have definitions of open source AI now, which is widely accepted. But again, coming to issues with respect to licenses. See, one problem here is again, if you look at the copyright licenses, there have been like court decisions over a period of time from various jurisdictions. So we have a, I would say, a better understanding of how these licenses would work, how these terms would work. But one problem with AI, I mean, when it comes to the legal side of it, I can't give you, I would say, answers which uh, how do I put it? Like I can't even be sure myself as to whether I am saying the right thing when it comes to something like AI, because it's still an evolving field, and there are, unless we have definite judgments coming from various jurisdictions, various courts, we can't never be sure of it. Now, see when any day we talk about copyright, essentially, who gets a copyright? A person who writes something or writes a code or creates something. So the core question here is when it comes to code generated by whether there can even be copyright on that. That is a question that in most jurisdictions the answer would be no. So unless it is something created by a human, you cannot have an IP right on it, a copyright on it, or maybe a patent right on it. So that is one issue that we need to understand. I mean, I'm not sure whether things might change over a period of time. There are questions asked about whether there could be some kind of, let's say, protection given to, for example, you have various prompts being asked as far as the AI tool is concerned, the model is concerned, and then because people can maybe argue that there is creativity attached to it, the kind of prompts which are being asked, the kind of questions that you're let's say asking the AI model as such, and then the kind of responses that you get and how you kind of build on top of it. So, but these are kind of areas which, I mean, I would say I don't have an answer to it yet, and that this is something evolving, something rapidly developing. But still, one area we definitely need to be careful about is the kind of output that we get often from AI tools, which have learned from code which is distributed under various open source licenses, various other licenses for that matter. And if this code is being used, in some cases maybe verbatim, or let's say we give an exact copy of, uh, let's say, source code which is licensed under various license terms. not even open source, could be anything else, and whether how safe it will be to use these tools. Safe in the sense legally safe. So especially when it comes to, for example, this company developing for uh, clients across the globe, and uh, they need to ensure that this whatever software that they develop, whatever source code that they provide them, they have complete ownership over that, and that may not be possible when it is, let's say, AI generated. So that is one question that we definitely will have to answer to ensure that see there is no harm in companies using let's say open source software, because they know the kind of obligations that come along with it, and there is clear guidance as to how you need to, let's say, what are the things that you need to do, and there are clear processes which are in place now, and um, there are even now ISO standards as to how these systems should be developed, like and the kind of process that you have in this organization to ensure that you are in compliance with various obligations of these licenses, which is I'm talking about the open chain compliance. So, but when it comes to something like an AI generated model, there will definitely be problems if you can never be sure about what is the source as far as these components are concerned, these source code components are concerned. So that is one major challenge, I would say, when it comes to companies. Now, to your specific question about let's say what happens and when it comes to data which is being used, and when it comes to code which is generated, etc., that is one major issue when it comes to data. In fact, I mean, this an area that we are currently working on. We, in a sense, SFLC is working on, along with a few other organizations, uh, about about a license which can ensure that your rights are protected. For example, there could be cases where you create a data, like a database, and then uh, you kind of publish that data. And what is the guarantee that somebody does not just take this data away and use it in a way and then commercialize it? I mean, there's nobody saying that somebody should not commercialize it, but it should not be done in such a way that a person who is taking effort to generate this data, who is taking effort to then make it public, etc., and make it available to the public, he does not even get a attribution for that, get an attribution for the kind of work that he has done, kind of effort that a person or an organization has put in. So that is one issue that we are trying to address, and whether we can have a license which would take care of such database rights, such rights over even let's say it may not be just code, and maybe maybe a company comes and just takes away all this, and you are left with not even an attribution to the work that you are putting. So that is one area that we are currently researching and looking at the kind of maybe license terms that we can have to ensure that the work done by the community, work done by organizations are protected, and at least they are attributed, even if somebody takes that data away and use it for learning. Yeah, thanks, Vignesh.
Yeah, definitely, Prashant. As you have mentioned, I understand that it is the codes which have to come up with an understanding of, if how they see the intellectual properties in case of AIs. But as an individual, as an free software enthusiast, what do you think we all can do or contribute to, for such license to, come up?
So I mean, the current license that I mentioned. So the idea is, of course, once we are working on a draft, and we are also will be putting it up for wider consultation. That's the whole idea. So what the community can, of course, do is contribute to this. Once we put this up, We also various use cases that you can bring to our notice. For example, problems that they're currently facing. Whether when somebody just, let's say, takes away their source code, their I mean any content that they have created for that matter, and then use it without their knowledge, without their attribution. So things like that. And what is it that can be done to address this? So we of course will be once we have a draft which agreeable to all the partner organizations who are part of this effort, we'll be publishing this and for wider consultation. But that definitely could take some time. But then what the community can do is, I mean, be involved in this effort, and like the way it happened with the earlier licenses, the what we propose to do is to have wider consultations, get inputs from people, and then go through a let's say round of revisions before we finally publish it. But then, yes, this is what the community could do when it comes to the legal side of it.
Definitely, Prashant. That was so much valuable, and you have also shown us what we can do to contribute to the free software license for AI further. Uh, Even without a legal background, I think now we have some other way to contribute to it, and we'll definitely take it up. And uh, I think with this, we can close today's discussion. And thanks for your valuable time, Prashant, for joining in and sharing your knowledge. And as well as I thank everybody for joining in today and being part of this event. Uh, Unfortunately, Mishi Chaudhary couldn't join for the day due to some due to some unavoidable situations. But I'm hoping to see you all again for the next event to be on 20th of this month. We don't have a session tomorrow. We have it day after tomorrow, 20th. I would like to see you all on 20th again. Thank you. Have a
Thanks,
great day.
Vignesh and SFLCT.